This is part 2 of our chapter 1 for the course of introduction to for the course of legal and ethical issues in business. Cut. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the part 2 of our chapter 1 course, legal and ethical issues in business. So we were discussing about some basic business law and some ethical issues we will discuss in our next classes. So first one, in our previous class we have discussed several kinds of ethics. We have discussed some laws, some practices that should be followed, and in this class we will discuss about some classifications of law, where we will talk about substantive law and procedural law, public and private law, civil and criminal law. So starting with the substantive law, it is the law which governs the original rights and obligations of individuals. Substantive law may derive from the common law, statutes, or a constitution. For example, we can say a claim to recover for a breach of contract or negligence or fraud would be a common law substantive right. A state statute giving an employee the right to sue for employment discrimination would also create a substantive law. So it is the law creating rights and duties. So what about procedural law? It is the law that establishes the rules of the court and the methods used to ensure the rights of individuals in the court system. In particular, laws that provide how the business of the court is to be conducted, or the rules for enforcing the substantive law. For example, pleading requirements or discovery rules or standards of review can be procedural law. What about private and public law? Public law usually deals with the relationship between the government and individuals. It is usually constitutional law, administrative law, it can be criminal law, it can be tax law. Constitutional law are established by the government, by the constitution usually, and we can say that it is a public law. Some administrative law, some criminal law, every criminal laws and tax laws are very much good example of a public law. So it is the law dealing with the relationship between government and individuals. What about private law? Private law is the law that governs the relationship among individuals and some legal entities. So, if we talk about examples, we can give many examples regarding this private law. An example can be contract law. So, in a contract dispute, suppose Thomas offers to sell a car to Jane for $10,000. Ms. Jane accepts the offer but then changes her mind and decides not to buy the car. So Thomas then sues Ms. Jane for breach of contract, seeking damage of $10,000. It is one example of private law. Another example can be Mr. Rahim is driving his car on the highway when he is rear-ended by Mr. Karim. Mr. Rahim suffers injuries in the accident severely and sues Mr. Karim for damages. That can also be private law among individuals. Property law can also be regarding property. Private laws can also be ensured. Suppose Ms. Paula owns a house in the suburbs and wants to sell it. She enters into a contract with Mr. X to sell the house for $200,000 for say. the sale goes through and Mr. Bob takes possession of the house. This is also a private law through contract. So these are very much real life examples of private laws. We can move towards civil and criminal law. Civil law deals with the rights and duties, the violation of which constitutes a wrong against an individual or other legal entity. So, to state in a bookish term, civil law deals with behavior that constitutes an injury to an individual or other private party, such as corporations. For example, defamation, breach of contract, negligence resulting in injury or death, and property damage can also be, all those are under civil law. Criminal laws are quite different. The law establishing duties that, if violated, constitutes a wrong against the entire community. So, in book terms, criminal law deals with behavior that is or can be constructed as an offense against the public, society, or the state itself, even if the immediate victim is an individual. Examples can be murder, assault, theft, drunken driving, and so on. So, where those laws come from? Talking about the sources of law. There can be many types of law. First one is the constitutional law, then judicial law, legislative law, administrative law. We know about constitutional law established by the constitution itself, by the government. Judicial law comes from the court orders. What about legislative laws? Legislation is usually the preparing and enacting of laws by local, community, state, or national legislatures. In other contexts, it is usually sometimes used to apply to municipal ordinances and to rules and regulations of administrative agencies passed in the exercise of delegated legislative functions. We can also mention about the mention regarding our DNCC, North Dhaka City Corporation, or South Dhaka City Corporation, DSCC or DNCC. So those are the legislative law. If they enact any law, they are legislative law. What about administrative law? Administrative law is the actual legal framework within which public administration is carried out. It is usually derived from the need to create and develop a system of public administration under law. It is a concept that may be compared with the much older notion of justice under law that was enacted in UK most probably. So thank you very much for attending today's class. Inshallah, we'll start our new chapter in the next class. Thank you very much for attending today's class. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.